Hello, my name is Jules Parker, and today I'm going to be giving this presentation on how poverty in communities affects literacy and literacy rates in America. I'm giving this presentation because I'm going into elementary education and find that this could be helpful in my future, especially with identifying and maybe correcting problems in the education system, no matter what school I'm teaching at, whether that school be a rich, well developed urban school, or maybe a poorer school that doesn't have access to certain technologies and doesn't have access to certain ways of learning. Anyways, let's get started. So, I do have a couple objectives to talk about from this presentation that I do want you to take away from it. I want you to be able to identify the disadvantages that people in poverty face in terms of their literacy. So, being able to identify the disadvantages, such as not having access to computers, not having access to proper teachers that don't have the proper education because the school can't afford to hire those certain teachers. In Michigan, I know this is a huge problem, especially because teachers in Michigan can now have a bachelor degree of any choice. It does not have to be in just education or a certain topic that that teacher is going to teach on. I also want you to take away that you will be able to speak about the problems that face America's overall education system because talking about poverty in terms of literacy is just one of the many problems that America has with its education system. Not only do we face systemic racism, socioeconomic poverty, but we also face much, much more. And this is just one of the many problems that America is facing with its education system. Moving on, I want to talk about what literacy is and how it relates to poverty and maybe some communities that are living in poverty. So, there is no black and white definition. The definition of literacy continues to change. Literacy is complex. It doesn't just seem to be reading and writing anymore, and it is hard for our students to keep up with all the different types of literacy that there are in this world. And expecting one student to excel at one thing, to excel at everything is just not the case when there is so much that we are just expecting students to be good at. Not only is it hard for all students to be good at all the different types of literacies that there are in this modern day, but students living in poverty are at a irrefutable disadvantage in education, and we can see that very, very clearly, especially when you can see just what they don't have access to, such as drama clubs, different types of sports, and different types of culture. Poverty and education are inextricably linked. I remember that in my town, we didn't have anybody really living there but white people, and it was a very small, closed, poor community. And because of that, I didn't get to grow up with a lot of the advantages that my peers in college got to grow up with. I have I came to college with a closed off mind. I came to college not knowing just what disadvantages other people faced, and I didn't realize just what it meant to not have access to proper education. Now that we've talked about the connection to literacy and poverty, I wanted to talk about the different types of literacy I've learned in this class and the different types of connection to poor communities. So, critical literacy. Critical literacy does not have a set definition, but is what you think about the world, the views that you have on the world, the connections you make to subjects in your own lives, and it's really good to make sure that students are really using their critical thinking to look at the world around them and be able to make decisions for themselves. And rich students usually get to have really good critical thinking and critical literacy skills. This is not the case with poorer students, especially because we can barely put money into different forms of education, let alone teaching them how to critically think. Because of this, the circle of poverty tends to not get broken, and poorer students tend to not realize the world around them. And like I said, this was a very huge reasoning I wanted to discuss this was because I grew up in a very small, poor community. And because of this, I had no access to the outside world. And looking at the socioeconomic the socio-political system through different eyes, but the ones that my family had and the ones that people had around me. Now I wanted to talk about digital literacy. So what is digital literacy and media literacy? So the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information requiring both cognitive and technical skills. So that's the definition right out of the American Library Association's Digital Literacy Task Force. So what does that mean? It pretty much means being able to use the technology in this modern world at a proficient level, being able to communicate, being able to look up, use Google, know how to airdrop, things like that. Because of the fact that poor communities do not have the correct budgets, they're usually not able to update their own technology. And without proper technology, how are you going to be able to teach digital literacy? Um, so digital literacy and media literacy can also connect to each other because media literacy is knowing correct sources. So knowing that Wikipedia may not be the greatest thing to use when it comes to looking up one's own health. Um, and because of this, poorer students are at a disadvantage for not knowing how to use proper technology and to even be taken advantage of by companies and advertisements. So, what is cultural literacy? The power of one story. Now, this TED Talk from this course really stuck out to me, and hearing a single story. So, what is a single story and the fear of a single story? So, the story being told about one race or ethnicity that is told over and over again until it is believed. So, thinking in terms of my own community, since we were a community of just white people, and it was a very poor and illiterate community. I did not know what different cultures were outside of my own, and that put me at a very big disadvantage to not be accepting of others, to not be as empathetic as others. And mind you, I did learn at a very young age that this was the incorrect way of thinking, but a lot of people from my community did not know that and did not have access to things that could teach them that. So I remember the power of one story really sticking out with me because of the story of Africa that I've been told over and over again and not knowing that this is false and fabricated. Poor communities cannot afford to incorporate cultures into their lessons, and this is really the case with many of the small communities in America. All right, now I want to talk about multimodals and how to use them in the classroom and why poor communities often don't have access to certain types of learning styles that could put them at more of an advantage. So there's visual, auto, spattle, oral, written, gestural, and tactile. All of these are different learning styles to accommodate different students, and more rich off communities usually have greater access to all these different types of learning. Poor communities usually don't have access to these and can often get left behind, especially students that may be in the special education system and may not get the certain special attention that they may need, especially because these schools don't have the budget to help these students out. And most students will get left behind because of this, and it is the sad reality of the world we live in. Anyways, I wanted to talk about key connections and takeaways that I've had from doing this presentation, and ones that I want you to take away. So, why is this topic so important to me? I think that maybe you can see that I keep referring to the fact that I lived in a poor community that was made up of a majority of white people, and because of this, I did not get to learn about different cultures, different learnings besides Christianity, disgustingly enough, and I was brainwashed into thinking many of my views at the time. And even though I had access to, well, I guess piano, which made me learn different cultures and different styles of living, other people in my community didn't have access to that. And because of that, they are illiterate, they are racist, they are brainwashed and Trumpies. And it's very sad to see that just because they don't have access to that type of education or those type of cultures, they are stuck in that way of thinking. Um, I want everybody to know that education is a human right and should not be dictated by how much money you make. And I always hear the term education for all. However, that doesn't mean adequate education for all. And I want students and children to all have proper access to proper education that puts them at an advantage for what they want to do in life. Literacy rates should not be dependent on money, like I said, and poor communities are at a larger disadvantage when it comes to education. And because of this, the cycle of this will never stop. And usually the rich will continue to get richer and the poor will continue to get poorer, and that is the system that we have set up in America and why I so desperately want to try to fight against that. So, before we go, I wanted to talk about 3 different resources if you wanted to continue your learning. So, this is a web page to childfund.org, Poverty and Education, and if you click on it, you can go to a website that will take you to just all this different material on education and maybe the effects on poverty and education, the importance of education in developing countries. I really wish that this talked more about America's education system instead of third world countries. But I do think that this is relevant to America's education system as well because of how we are and how our system is set up. The next one that I have here, if you click on it, you can look at just how much of a disadvantage students are at because of poverty and the development of literacy and early reading habits. So you can see that even in early childhood, being poor and being rich is already a division. And it really starts to come out later on in life, but even in early childhood, puts students at an already disadvantage before starting school. And the last resource that I have here, if it loads, is the National Libraries of Medicine abstract. And even if you want to read the scholarly article here on Canadian families and the gap between rich and poor, and how students that are rich are starting school at a way higher advantage and with higher literacy rates and readiness than their peers that live in poverty. Anyways, these are 3 resources that you can just use if you are interested in learning anything more about poverty in relation to all of these literacies. Anyways, these are all of my references. I want to thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I hope that you've learned something and maybe taken something away from this. I know that I definitely have. Thank you so much again.